Welcome, everyone, to the Advanced Sports Analytics Podcast. It's Wednesday, July 21st. I'm here with Stuart Gibson. We are going over the TPC Twin Cities PGA event. We have a giveaway of how many tickets, Stuart? 3 tickets today?
We have 2 tickets today for the long drive contest. $20 value, 3.5K guaranteed. Their big tournament for the weekend.
So for that, just comment in the YouTube channel with your username or in our Twitter thread, do an @ mention for Advanced Sports Analytics. Stuart, how did the British Open go for you? I had some good sweats going down to the end, but you really, it was a fairly chalky finish for DFS purposes, and I didn't have the right combos. How about you?
Yeah, I had not much going in tournaments. Had a decent cash lineup, but yeah, it just wasn't overweight on any of those guys at the top. Didn't have zero exposure to any of them, but not enough exposure. But yeah, put together a decent cash lineup that was profitable on the week. Ron played well. Scheffler, Connors was kind of a nice surprise. So yeah, good, not great. That's kind of you'll take those weeks, I think. So yeah, looking ahead to the 3M this weekend. I don't know. I think the major tournaments always kind of attract more casual play, which is good. But of course, the names are always more recognizable. So I think there's slightly more edge against the potentially stronger competition in some of these, secondary, or I would consider the 3M kind of a tertiary type tournament. But yeah, looking forward to it. There's some deeper names that usually aren't in play for the big tournaments that I think are going to be in play this weekend. And I think we've had some good success with some of those deep plays in the weak fields. So yeah, hoping to replicate that again this week.
So usually in these podcasts, we don't bury the lead. We come straight out and give our favorite plays. This week, I want to do things a little bit differently. I want you to go through and give the 30,000-foot view of the ASA methodology for projecting these events. So if you're just interested in our best plays, be patient. In five to 10 minutes, we will just spell it all out, what our favorite plays are. But I do want to go over this 30,000-foot view for a bit. For those who are well acquainted with our optimizer, our optimizer lives under the PGA tab at Pin Shot Projections. And what people will frequently do is go to the Slate Settings tab, pick the site that they're interested in, hopefully SuperDraft, and then create some rules. Maybe they want to exclude some players, and then they will pick the number of optimals they might want to do and generate those lineups. And then you can also go into the projections tab and see exactly what SuperDraft score we project for each player. And we break it down in terms of win odds, raw score, adjusted score, all that sort of stuff. But the way we do it is to statistically break down each player by their components, their strokes gained components, and then basically do a course fit as to where you would like to have strokes gained for a course. So I'm wondering, Stuart, if you could give the 30,000-foot view of the ASA methodology, and then we'll
Yeah,
go into our best plays for this particular week.
yeah, sure. So it's a machine learning algorithm that we use, relying on past tournament data. The data that we use goes back to the 2015 season. So I think we're in kind of the 6th year of data. And yeah, I mean, there are kind of different components that feed into the model as far as features go. we first kind of look at just different I guess time periods of form data. So and kind of we try to make all the components that feed into the predictive model accessible in one way or another within the application. So we are looking at player performance by the different strokes gained, categories, putting, around the green, approach, off the tee, over different time intervals. So short form, looking at kind of the past 6 months, medium form, looking at or what we consider medium form, looking at the past 365 days, the kind of the rolling year average, and then long form, a rolling 2-year average. These are kind of unfit, just pure time aggregated metrics. We also incorporate win odds, the Vegas backing. We use in our model Betfair's odds, and we've been tracking those over time and getting historical win odds for tournaments that preceded the genesis, I guess, of this model. And then we also do attempt to do some degree of tournament specific, course specific fitting for players. Tournament specific, looking at stuff like the strength of the field. So, you look at some of our top projected players like Cameron Tringali, for example, projects well this weekend, and that is partly a function of his win odds, but also if you look at his strokes gained relative to the strength of the field, he projects much more favorably this week than he would have, say, last week at the Open with the star-studded field. And then we also try to roll up course fit metrics through what is called a mixed effects model, pretty much understanding or acknowledging that the impact of latent variables have varying impact on the variable that we're trying to predict, fantasy output, conditional on some grouping or categorical variable. In the case of this course fit, that categorical variable is the course itself. For example, the relative impact of off the tee play at Twin Cities this weekend might be very different from the relative impact of off the tee play at any other course. And then also considering course specific metrics like the average fantasy points allowed by the course in historical, past events, which can be tricky to do when we have courses that don't have any past data. TPC Twin Cities has hosted the 3M Open twice now. I think the tournament debuted in 2019. So, a sample size of 2 is not no data, but it's certainly not as much data as we have with some of these older tournaments. And then also considering how players' performance vary relative to the type of grass that they're putting on. So we have here in the course info tab, players' strokes gained putting on bent grass, and then we can also see their bent grass delta. So like Zach Sucher, for example, is a plus putter on bent grass, but there's a decent chance. Or maybe we could look at McNeely. He's probably a better example. Like a plus putter on bent grass, and probably an average to plus putter on other grass types, but his delta on bent grass, that is how many strokes gained putting has he achieved on bent grass compared to strokes gained achieved on all other grass types, gives you a sense of like how players putt on certain grass types, which can roll up into projection. Course history, so we have the course average strokes gained that you can sort on, and the number of appearances. So like Wolf has really excelled at Twin Cities. He won the event in 2019. And then he also, I think, played well in his start last year. And then we have these guys, Schwartzel, for example, has played one really good tournament at Twin Cities. And then we have all these, input variables. These kind of model outputs actually feed to a model input. And then we run that through a machine learning algorithm. So, I think an algorithmic kind of modeling approach is really important for understanding how to weight all these different components that feed into a projection. With sports I would say like basketball is maybe one where it's perfectly reasonable, I think, to take like just a linear kind of combination model and say, I'm projecting Russell Westbrook to play 42 minutes and, he scores X amount of fantasy points per minute and his opponent is, really good at defense and they kind of limit point guards to maybe 0.25 fewer fantasy points per minute than their kind of prior average, and do some sort of just like algebra, I guess, to put together projections. But I think with sports like golf, baseball, football, having an creating a model that appropriately weights or seeks to understand how to appropriately weight these inputs is super valuable. So that's kind of the approach that we take for PGA modeling and really for all our sport modelings. I do think doing some sort of nonlinear machine learning or algorithmic approach is super valuable to help understand how some of these different variables interact with one another, when certain variables or signals that appear to be strong should be caveated due to small sample size or the interaction with other variables. So I hope that gives people that might be a 10,000 instead of a 30,000 foot overview. But I hope that makes sense as to kind of how we do the modeling, why we make some of the considerations we do. And hopefully that helps people understand as we talk through the projections, some of the data inputs that shape the output of the projections.
On a week like last week where we were on a unique course, how do you do it? You look for comparable courses?
So not so much comparable courses, but looking at the tournament as a whole. So I think that while the British Open is played on a different course just about every year, they do, in the British Open in particular, where they are playing on these link style courses that I think have a very distinct makeup and style. Looking at the the tournament level metrics and some of the strokes gained weights, history, course allowances. Like I do think the major tournaments where you do see more course variation, they tend to strive to select courses that have similar difficulties with regards to the scoring baseline that they allow, the slope rating. So these are kind of some approaches that we try to take when we don't have any prior course data to rely on.
Makes sense. And this week, an easier course where the winner might be 25 under or something very, very low. What this course sort of shows up as all of the components. What would you say is the single most important factor in general when we have these very low scoring events? It tends to be a sort of a wedge and putting kind of situation, and you want the good wedge and putter guys, and a lot of the result comes down to just variance within the putting statistic. The British Open obviously relied on precise iron play, good long iron play. A course like this, they're not hitting many 5 irons and such. It's really just drives and wedges and putts. So when you're breaking it down into the components, what comes out as especially important this week?
Yeah, so that's where that mixed effects model comes into play. We can model out the relative importance of different strokes across, grouping or pooling data by course. So we have had, I think as of late, we've had a number of these kind of secondary and tertiary tournaments where there is a super, I guess, easy course, for lack of a better word. We have winning scores close to or below or above rather 20 strokes below par. That is likely to be the same case at TPC Twin Cities. However, those courses that we've had recently, and I forget, like it was like Golf Club of Detroit, I think maybe even Muirfield for the Memorial. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones that we recently had, where we had this component, but we had negative coefficients on many, if not all, of the strokes gained traits, meaning not that being bad is good, but rather that the relative importance of skills in any of these categories is downweighted in terms of its ability to forecast or accuracy, I guess, in forecasting overall player performance, meaning that being good doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to finish well or fantasy score well. Another way of thinking about that is just that there's high amounts of randomness or volatility in fantasy production. TPC Twin Cities, not the case. We have positive coefficients and actually quite high positive coefficients. The lowest coefficient is strokes gained putting at more than half a standard deviation above tour average. So to me, my interpretation is that there will be a lot of scoring, and there should actually be not a ton of volatility. The good golfers should excel. The weak golfers in the field should struggle to put up strong fantasy performances. And the fact that all 4 strokes gained traits are positive, and I would say substantially positive coefficients, means that I think the balanced golfers are likely to succeed. I mean, we saw that last year with Michael Thompson, who's the winner, not really an exceptional golfer in any one facet of play, but didn't really have a weakness in his game, was average to above average in just about every stroke gain category coming into the tournament. So I do think trying to target golfers who are very balanced. There are some weeks where we're willing to take shots on guys who have clear flaws in their game, but are willing to take shots on them because the holes in their game or the weaknesses in their game are, we believe, to be downweighted in importance for a certain course. Not the case this weekend. I do think, and we kind of touch on this in the SuperDraft strategy article that will be coming out later today. So check that out on strategy.superdraft.io. We touch on, I think, the want to target golfers who are balanced, either guys who gain strokes in all 4 categories, or avoiding golfers who have, even if they're strong in 2 to 3 categories, if they have glaring weaknesses in a certain component of play, maybe reasoning for being a little more conservative on selecting those players.
Makes sense. So now after 20 minutes of the 10 to 30,000 foot view instead of 5, we will give our best plays for the week. We love Cameron Tringali. He is a balanced golfer. He is a 1.45 multiplier and has the highest projected SuperDraft score this week. We love Hank Lebioda, who we like quite often because he's been at these very high multipliers, and he's been a pretty good play. He's our second favorite golfer. Then Emiliano Grillo, Chris Kirk, Johan Vegas, Bo Hoag. All of these players are 1.35 and above. In our top 10, we only have one player who's a low multiplier player. That's Patrick Reed. He's 1.15. Then if you're looking at the top 20, there's only one other low multiplier player. That's Tony Finau at 1.15. We don't want to belabor the point of why you want the high multiplier guys with SuperDraft. But it basically comes down to the idea that the win is relatively undervalued or low valued on SuperDraft, and the fact that you can get a similar number of birdies and a similar distribution of pars and of birdies and bogeys for a 1.5 guy, as a 1.2 guy means these 1.5 guys are just much more valuable on the super draft scoring, when they're roughly comparable. And this is a week where we just simply don't have many low multiplier people in the field. And Patrick Reed, our number one. So some of the low multiplier guys are guys like Dustin Johnson, Patrick Reed, Oosthuizen, that are coming from the British Open and have that sort of question mark Finau. They might have less preparation than some of the high multiplier guys that have been in the States, don't have to make the time adjustment, have been at the venue practicing, all this kind of stuff. So, Stuart, you want to take it from there? Maybe just give our standard spiel about why the high multiplier guys are good in general on SuperDraft.
Yeah, so I mean, I think they're. Oh, I'm getting some echo. So I think the SuperDraft, the high multiplier guys are good in the right spots. Last week, our projections, I think, had a healthy mix of high multiplier guys and low multiplier guys. We were very high on Rahm, Schauffele, Finau, I think, kind of in the mid to low multiplier range. On a weak field where, if you look at it, there are three guys with the multiplier below 1.2. Like, there are going to be mid to high multiplier golfers who finish in the top five, and at a difficult course where, and we thought the British Open, I think, we thought Royal St. George's was going to be more difficult than it ended up being. It was one of the easier major courses we've seen in a while. But at a difficult course where, the winning score is only, 5 or so strokes under par, there are fewer scoring opportunities, and I think more of the value in terms of fantasy upside shifts towards finishing position. Say Dustin Johnson out shooting second place by 2 strokes in a tournament where 5 under wins, 2-stroke delta on a 5 under winning score is proportionally a pretty big margin. And there are just fewer positive scoring opportunities for players such that the finished position is one of the true kind of guaranteed plus positive fantasy point scoring opportunities. But on a scorer's course like Twin Cities, where the winning score is probably going to be around 20 under, there are so many more scoring opportunities, fantasy scoring opportunities via birdieing, eagling, par, etc., where I think it's just really difficult for the low multiplier guys to distance themselves in a large enough way from not any one specific high multiplier player that we have immense confidence is going to be at the heels or above, say, DJ or Reed or Finau, but we just know that there are going to be high multiplier guys that put up 15 underscores, potentially 20 underscores. And DJ, if we knew that DJ was guaranteed to win the tournament at 21 under, if we knew Reed or Finau was guaranteed to win the tournament at 20 under, so of course they would make for strong plays. But I mean, we've seen week in and week out some of these elite golfers just not really put it together completely in a weak field. And I just think the risk reward trade-off that you get with these low multiplier guys is just so squarely in the camp of too much risk for the potential reward. I don't know. I just at 1x, I just don't know that DJ. I mean, I think he's got to be like a full fade. There's just for tournament purposes, there's just so little upside. If he doesn't win the tournament outright, I just don't see how he can be a part of the optimal lineup. And then even if he does win the tournament outright at 1x, it doesn't even necessarily guarantee that he has to be part of a lineup to win a tournament if you get the right mid to low multiplier guys. And then, of course, with the weak field, there's going to be a lot of kind of deeper golfers that make it through to the weekend, and making it through to the weekend when 2 rounds can generate 5 to 10 strokes under par is way more valuable than it is in a tournament where making it through to the weekend doesn't even necessarily guarantee that you will be gaining strokes. So I think that's kind of the thinking for why we're skewing low multiplier this weekend. Yeah.
And just to add to that, because this is like the single most important thing probably for new players to know the scoring system. In a week like this where the field is weak, you can play the high multiplier guys more confidently because they're more likely to make the cut. And always the high multiplier guys, not always, but often the high multiplier guys project very well. But the problem with just building strictly according to the projected best lineups and just shoving in all the 1.4 to 1.6 multiplier guys, the problem in general is that it then becomes unlikely that you get 6 of 6 through to the weekend, which is often required to win the tournament. So in a normal week, you kind of want to pick your positions with your 1.4 to 1.6 and then have a couple of guys that are 1.2 to 1.4 that are very likely to make the cut. This week you can play the high multiplier guys a little bit more confidently just based on the fact that the field is weaker and the weaker guys are more likely to get through. And just to emphasize the difference between DK and SuperDraft scoring, on DK it's very important to win. So for instance, you get 1 point for a 45th place finish. You get 30 points for a first place finish, 20 points for a second place finish. It's very important to have the high finishes. Also, DK really rewards birdies and variance in general. So a birdie followed by a bogey is worth cumulatively 2.5 points on DraftKings. A par followed by a par is worth 1 point. So the stable golfer gets 1 point. The high volatility golfer gets 2.5. And the projected birdies per round for like your elite golfers tends to be a good bit higher. So this variance system tends to reward the better golfers. There's also bonuses for stuff like all 4 rounds under 70 and bogey-free rounds. Streaks of 3 birdies are better. So DraftKings in general just rewards the best golfers in a way that SuperDraft really does not, because SuperDraft has 15 points for first and 1 point for 25th, for instance. 15 points for first. It's relatively underweighted in their scoring system, and keep in mind that there's multipliers as well. So like a 10th with a 1.5 multiplier is 6 points, which is like an eighth. But if you had say a second from a higher multiplier guy is better than a first place from a low multiplier guy. And then the big difference with SuperDraft scoring is that a birdie followed by a bogey is worth 1 point cumulatively, whereas a par followed by a par is worth 2 points cumulatively. So par is actually better than birdie bogey. So low variance is good. That tends to be kind of the way that your high multiplier guys will go anyway. They just have a so, and in general, like with this type of scoring, the whole field is going to be somewhat clumped together. It's going to be hard for any single golfer to really distinguish themselves according to this scoring. and therefore you would just prefer higher multiplier even if you're giving up some skill. So again, taking it to this week, we just like the high multiplier guys that have good course fit, and it's Tringali is a real standout play. He's got a spread of more than 3 points over the second best golfer, so he's a guy we really like. He might not be very popular. He just generally isn't for whatever reason. Then Lebioda, Grillo. Grillo is making the trip back from the UK, but I wouldn't be too worried about that. Kirk, Vegas. I'm just reading through our top 10. Bo Hogue, Doug Gim, Pat Reed, Kyle Stanley, Cameron Davis. And then things start to drop off quite a bit. So like our 10th best golfer is projected for 73.6 adjusted points. Tringali is 83 points. Our 20th best golfer is 70 points. And then it becomes fairly condensed. So I really think that this is a week where you can follow our projections pretty tightly and not worry too much about ownership, because it's the type of field and the type of guys where I think our best plays are not going to have a lot of ownership. And I just go ahead. I would just say, reading our optimal lineups right now, it's stuff like our best is Grillo, Tringali, Kirk, Vegas, Lebioda, Hogue. I think you could follow our optimals pretty closely this week. The way I would do it personally is run some sets where you exclude one or two of our chalky plays, and just rotate out the guys that you're excluding. Like, I would not be comfortable locking in Bo Hogue, for instance. Even Lebioda, like Vegas. I would sort of run some cycles of our lineup generator where you're blocking out certain chalky guys, because there are players that I'm extremely comfortable with, like Tringali. If he burns me and doesn't make the trip across the Atlantic very well, so be it. Grillo, sort of similar situation. But I will not be all in on Doug Gim or Hogue. What's your read on this situation?
Yeah, so first starting with cash, I'm with you, and I have been burned by trying to get aggressive with Hogue in the past, so I think there's probably some Hogue PTSD. So certainly for cash, I do think there's a case to be made for going to like maybe our third optimal, which subs out Hogue for Patrick Reed. Reed lacks phenomenal upside because of the low multiplier, but I think is a pretty safe bet to make it through to the weekend. Of course, we have seen kind of the cream of the crop in some of these weak fields not really show up in a full capacity, but I do think for cash purposes, trying to lower your cumulative multiplier to get guys with high floors, high probability of making it through to the weekend should serve you well. So I think maybe for cash, like dropping down to a lineup with Reed makes some sense. I'm looking at some of the other even lower multipliers, like down here at cumulative 8.3, you get Reed, and then you also drop, it looks like, from Lebioda to Gim is what I'm seeing. Yeah. But I do kind of like this third optimal one here for cash game purposes. For tournament, it's been interesting. In previous weeks, we have kind of recommended a layered approach where you try to mix in safe low multiplier guys with a sprinkling of kind of dart throws from the high multiplier tier. I think this is a week where, I mean, you can go like full YOLO with some of these high multiplier guys. Like, the reason for not getting overexposed to guys in like the 1.45 to like 1.65 range is because they do have inherent risk. But like, I mean, Tringali at 29 to 1, 1.45x, like, I feel really good about Tringali, even though he is, you know, a high multiplier. Like Lebiota 1.6, nearly the max multiplier, 41 to 1. Like, Vegas feels good about Hank Lebiota. And Lebiota's been interesting. He's not like the prototypical course fit, but he's not terrible. I mean, he as of late hasn't been terrible in any one component of his game. He's within average or above average, I think, for really all four traits, but he's really been an exceptional approach player, which has played up at some of the recent courses he's played at. But like with Lebiota, I mean, he's been on fire. He's been top 10 in his last 3 starts, 7 straight made cuts. So like, I feel really good about Lebiota at 1.6. Kirk, Vegas. I mean, Vegas has been very strong of late, making cuts at a high rate. Kirk, I think of as a very consistent golfer over the last 6 months. He's been gaining strokes in every facet of his game. So, you know, even Hogue, who like typically is a risky golfer, you know, he's 81 to 1 to win. Not great odds, but like he, you know, not his usual kind of 150 or 200 to win. So I think it's a fine week to just, yeah, I mean, impose some sort of bounce so that you just get diversity. And, you know, if you're running, I don't know, let's say, I don't even know what the max is on the long drive, maybe I think like 15 or so and pass, you know, you kind of could turn up, you know, bounce and randomness and maybe differentiators just to get some degree of diversity. So like when I put those settings on, you know, we have guys who, you know, kind of max exposure out at 40%, 33 golfers, 33 unique golfers in 20 different lineups or 15 different lineups. You could probably go even a little tighter than that. Yeah, and I think just like it is one of those weeks where I feel fine YOLOing it. Maybe the only rules I would set actually is not getting too exposed to like Finau, Reed. I mean, really these trio of guys, like, for any one of these 3 guys to pay off in value, they have to finish probably top 1. You know, they have to win outright or finish top 2. So I think I would prefer not to build lineups that their only path to success are these 3 guys finishing within the top 2. So, you know, you could do something like max 1 of Dustin, Finau, Reed, and that way you'll probably get a little more exposure to some of these high multiplier guys. And then, I don't know, I mean, you could take your spots, like we mentioned, like Hogue is one of the high multiplier guys that feel a little uncomfortable with. Satoshi Kodaira was one of those guys that I kind of pegged as being a little uncomfortable. Garnett, Vegas doesn't seem to be too high on him, but we're surprisingly high on him given that he doesn't have great strokes gain metrics. Fratelli seems awesome from a Vegas standpoint, but he does have some clear weaknesses in his game, approach shot and putting. I don't know. Roger Sloan seems like a little risky. So, you know, you could kind of pick these guys just scrolling through like our top 50 or so guys who maybe you are feeling a little uncertain about and say, like, give me max 1 of Kodaira, Hogue, Garnett, Roger Sloan, something like that. And, you know, that is one way to kind of control the risky guys. But, you know, usually that way you're getting a little more exposure to some of these comfortable plays like Tringali, Kirk, Gim. We said we felt kind of so on. But yeah, I mean, I do think in previous weeks where you kind of want to layer your builds, you know, pull a couple guys from the low multiplier range, a couple guys from the mid tier, and then a couple guys from the high multiplier. Do you think it's a fine week to, you know, be okay with rostering 6 guys in the one, you know, I mean, you just like I think this is a perfectly good lineup right here. Like, you know, Hogue's a little risky, but I feel very good about these top 5 guys. You know, when you're looking at just the multiplier, none of these guys feel like truly comfortable plays, but just given the weak field, and if you look at the win odds, like Vegas is all very comfortable with these guys. All of them have a 1% chance or better of kind of winning the tournament. All of them, I would guess, are probably 60, 70% chance. I mean, I would guess some of these top guys are probably like 70, 80% chance. Hogue might be a coin flip to make the cut. But I think this week for tournaments, perfectly fine to not do too much group limitation at the high end and actually be more aggressive in restricting combinations of players at the low multiplier price point.
All right. Well, we had an extended pod today for this tournament. I wish everyone the best of luck. Be patient out there. These high scoring events tend to have a lot of volatility. Hopefully the putts will drop for everyone. Stuart, I will see you next week.
Yep. Good luck, guys.